The dusty main street of Millbrook stretched before Clara like a wound in the earth, flanked by weathered wooden buildings that seemed to lean away from her as she walked. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the frontier town, and the familiar sounds of daily life, the blacksmith's hammer, children's laughter, the creak of wagon wheels, felt distant and hollow to her ears. At 17, Clara Whitmore had grown accustomed to the sideways glances and whispered conversations that followed her wherever she went. The orphan girl, the burden, the reminder of tragedy that no one in Millbrook wanted to acknowledge. "There she goes again," muttered Mrs. Henderson from her porch, not bothering to lower her voice as Clara passed. "Walking around like she owns the place. Someone ought to remind her of her station." Clara's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. Her worn leather boots kicked up small clouds of dust with each determined step. She had learned long ago that responding to such comments only made things worse. In a town where everyone knew everyone's business, being an orphan without family connections made her an easy target for frustration and blame. The general store's bell chimed as she pushed open the door, the familiar scent of coffee beans and leather goods greeting her. Mr. Patterson looked up from behind the counter, his expression immediately shifting from neutral to uncomfortable. "What can I do for you, Clara?" he asked, his tone polite but strained. Before Clara could answer, the store's back door slammed open, and Mayor Thompson strode in, his face flushed with anger. His expensive suit looked out of place in the rustic store, a reminder of the growing divide between the town's established families and everyone else. "There you are," Thompson said, pointing an accusing finger at Clara. "I've been looking for you." "What's this about?" Clara asked, though she suspected she already knew. "The Morrison cattle," Thompson said, his voice rising. 3 head missing, and witnesses saw you near their property yesterday." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was looking for work. I asked Mr. Morrison if he needed help with anything, and he told me to get off his land." "Convenient story," Thompson sneered. "A desperate girl with no family, no prospects, and suddenly cattle go missing. The math isn't hard to figure out." "I didn't take anything," Clara said firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I've never stolen anything in my life." Thompson's smile was cold and calculating. "I'm saying that maybe it's time you found somewhere else to call home. Millbrook is a place for families, for people with roots and responsibilities. You're unattached, unaccounted for. That makes you dangerous." Clara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "This has been my home since I was 7 years old. My parents are buried in the cemetery behind the church." "Your parents," Thompson said with deliberate cruelty, "were drifters who happened to die here. That doesn't make you one of us." The words hit Clara like physical blows. "Give me 3 days," Thompson continued. 3 days to find somewhere else to go. After that, I'll have no choice but to involve the territorial authorities." That night, Clara sat in her small cabin at the edge of town and opened her mother's leather-bound journal. The entries told stories of dreams and hopes, but also revealed references to a place across the Missouri River, to opportunities and fresh starts that lay beyond the boundaries of Millbrook. "Samuel believes there are good people across the water," one entry read. "Families who judge a person by their character rather than their past. If things don't improve here, we may have to consider making the journey." By dawn, Clara had made her decision. She would not run from Millbrook in shame. She would leave on her own terms, pursuing the dream that her parents had carried in their hearts. The morning mist clung to the Missouri River like a living thing as Clara approached the riverbank. She had left Millbrook before dawn, carrying only what she could fit in her father's old traveling pack. The river was nearly half a mile wide, its current deceptively smooth, but powerful enough to drag down even strong swimmers. "You're either very brave or very foolish," said a voice behind her. Clara spun around to find an elderly man emerging from a cluster of cottonwood trees. He was small and wiry, with weathered skin and keen eyes. A fishing pole rested across his shoulders. "Name's Jonas Creek," the man said. Never seen a young woman standing here looking like she's about to swim to the other side. The crossing, Clara said carefully. Is it possible? Jonas laughed, but not unkindly. The Missouri's got moods, girl. This time of year with the spring runoff, she's running high and fast. Current would sweep you downstream faster than you could say goodbye. Clara's heart sank. What about a boat? You know, there used to be a ferry crossing about 10 miles upstream. Old Charlie Brewster ran it for years, but he died 2 months ago. Ferry's just sitting there, waiting for someone to claim it or let it rot. Jonas spent an hour explaining the river's currents, pointing out landmarks and describing navigation strategies. Clara listened intently, memorizing every detail. The 10-mile hike to the old ferry crossing took Clara most of the morning. When she reached it, she found a wooden ferry under canvas tarp, exactly as Jonas had described. The vessel was about 20 feet long, built from thick planks and reinforced with iron brackets. Getting the ferry into the water required every ounce of strength Clara possessed. She used fallen branches as levers, pushing and prying inch by inch until the bow finally touched water. She loaded her pack and provisions, then waded in to push off from shore. The crossing became a battle against the river's relentless power. Clara rowed with all her strength, trying to reach a small beach she had identified on the far shore. The current was stronger than anticipated, sweeping her steadily downstream despite her efforts. Halfway across, disaster struck. One of the oars caught in an underwater snag and was wrenched from her grip. With only one oar remaining, panic threatened to overwhelm her, but Clara forced herself to think. She shifted position and began using the remaining oar as a paddle, stroking first on one side, then the other. As the ferry approached shore, Clara realized the current was pushing her toward rocks at the southern end of the beach. She grabbed the mooring rope and prepared to leap into shallow water. The jump required perfect timing. Too early, and she'd be too far from shore. Too late, and the ferry would be destroyed. Clara counted to 3, took a deep breath, and jumped. The cold water shocked her as she plunged beneath the surface. Then her feet touched bottom and she pushed toward the surface, still clutching the rope. She emerged gasping but alive, able to drag the ferry to safety on the sandy beach. She had made it. Against all odds, she had crossed the Missouri River alone. As her breathing returned to normal, Clara looked back across the water toward Millbrook. That part of her life was truly over now. Whatever lay ahead, there could be no going back. Standing on shaky legs, Clara gathered her wet pack and began walking inland. The eastern shore stretched before her, rolling hills covered with tall grass and scattered groves of trees. Somewhere out there was the fresh start she had been seeking. After 2 hours of walking, Clara noticed smoke rising in controlled columns from beyond a ridge. When she reached the top, she stopped in amazement. Spread out in the valley below was a settlement unlike anything she had seen before. A dozen substantial log buildings forming a circle around a central common area, with shared gardens stretching towards surrounding hills. But what struck her most was not the layout, it was the people. Everywhere she looked, she saw cooperation and mutual assistance. Men and women worked together, raising a barn frame. Children of different ages played while older residents supervised. And several residents were clearly of mixed heritage, with features suggesting Native American, Mexican, or African ancestry. Clara descended cautiously. As she approached, a woman looked up from hanging laundry. "Well, hello there," the woman called out in a friendly voice. She was perhaps 35, with kind eyes and calloused hands. "You look like you've come a long way." "I have," Clara replied, suddenly conscious of her bedraggled appearance. "I'm sorry to intrude." "Intrude? Nonsense. Anyone who's made it this far is welcome to rest and share a meal." The woman extended her hand. "I'm Sarah Mendez. Welcome to Haven Valley." As Sarah led her toward the settlement's center, Clara found herself the subject of curious but friendly attention. After years of being treated like an unwelcome curiosity in Millbrook, the simple acceptance was overwhelming. "Is everyone here so welcoming to strangers?" Clara asked. Sarah laughed. We try to be. Most of us ended up here because we weren't welcome somewhere else. Tends to make you more understanding. At a well in the common area, Sarah drew up clear, cold water. Clara drank deeply, not realizing how thirsty she had become. "So what brings you to our little corner of nowhere?" Sarah asked. Clara hesitated, then chose honesty. "I needed to start over somewhere new. My situation in my previous home became untenable." Sarah nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "A trouble with the law? Family disputes? False accusations? And the kind of prejudice that makes a fair hearing impossible. We know about that here. Haven Valley was founded by people who needed second chances. People judged unfairly, or whose ideas didn't fit mainstream thinking." "What kind of people?" "All kinds. Our leader, Thomas Haven. He's a former preacher kicked out for saying all races were equal in God's eyes. Maria Santos came here after her Mexican husband was killed by vigilantes. The Johnsons are former slaves who bought their freedom and headed west, looking for a place where their children could grow up truly free." Clara looked around with new understanding. "It's like a refuge." "Exactly. A place where people can be judged by their actions rather than their background." Sarah paused. "Does that sound like something you might be interested in?" Before Clara could answer, a commotion erupted near the settlement's entrance. 3 men on horseback approached at a fast trot, their clothes marking them as professional trackers or bounty hunters. The lead rider was tall and lean, with cold eyes and a waxed mustache. He surveyed the settlement with obvious disdain. "Which one of you is in charge here?" he called out. An older man with graying hair stepped forward from the group working on the barn. This had to be Thomas Haven. There was something about his presence that suggested natural leadership. "I am," Haven replied calmly. "Thomas Haven. How can we help you?" The lead rider dismounted. "Name's Pike. We're tracking a runaway. Young woman, about 17, brown hair, traveling alone. Probably reached this area in the last day or two." Clara felt her blood turn to ice. Somehow they had followed her across the river. "What's this young woman accused of?" Haven asked, his tone becoming cooler. "Theft, cattle rustling to be specific. Her victims are offering a substantial reward." "I see. And you have legal authority?" Pike's smile was unpleasant. "I have all the authority I need." Clara realized these weren't official law enforcement. They were private bounty hunters hired by Thompson. They operated by their own rules and might not be concerned with bringing her back alive. "We haven't seen anyone matching that description," Haven said thoughtfully. "But you're welcome to look around." Respectfully, Sarah grabbed Clara's arm and began pulling her toward one of the buildings, but Pike's sharp eyes had already spotted them. Well, he said loudly. "What have we here?" He strode toward Clara, his companions flanking him. The residents gathered around, but Clara could see uncertainty in their faces. They were farmers and craftspeople, not fighters. "Clara Whitmore," Pike said when he reached her, "you've led us quite a chase. Time to come home and face the music." "I haven't done anything wrong," Clara said, surprised by her steady voice. "I've never stolen anything," Pike laughed. "That's what they all say, but the good people of Millbrook tell a different story." "That's a lie," Clara said hotly. "Mayor Thompson made those accusations because he wanted me gone. He never had proof. Who needs proof when you've got witnesses? Upstanding citizens whose word carries weight in court." Clara felt despair washing over her. In any legal proceeding, established citizens' testimony would outweigh hers. Thompson had built a case on circumstantial evidence and social prejudice. "We can do this easy or we can do it hard," Pike continued. "Your choice." Clara looked around at the Haven Valley residents, seeing sympathy, but also fear. She couldn't expect them to risk everything for a stranger. But then Thomas Haven stepped forward, placing himself between Pike and Clara. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," Haven said calmly. "Miss Whitmore is under our protection now. She's requested sanctuary, and we've granted it." Pike's hand moved to his gun. I don't know what game you think you're playing, old man, but this girl is coming with us. Do you have legal papers? Haven asked mildly. I'd be interested to see them. For the first time, Pike looked uncertain. Haven was calling his bluff. The bounty hunters probably had no official authority beyond what Thompson had given them. Legal papers or not? Pike snarled. We're not leaving without the girl. Yes, Haven said firmly. You are. The tension was thick. Pike calculated his options, weighing profit against risk. His companions looked nervous. Then salvation came from an unexpected source. "Riders coming," called a lookout. "About a dozen, coming fast from the east." Everyone turned toward the ridge, where dust marked a large group of approaching horsemen. Pike's face went pale as he realized his small party was about to be outnumbered. "This isn't over," he told Haven through gritted teeth. "We'll be back with proper authority." "You do that," Haven replied calmly, "but make sure you actually have it." Pike and his companions mounted and rode out at a fast gallop. The approaching riders turned out to be a supply train from the territorial capital, their timing perfect to discourage Pike's immediate plans. As the sun set, Clara found herself around a communal fire, sharing a meal with people who had defended her without question. For the first time in years, she felt like she might truly belong somewhere. But she knew Pike would return, and she needed a permanent solution to her problems. 3 days had passed since Pike's departure, but Clara could see worry in the residents' faces. Everyone knew the bounty hunters would return with reinforcements. What had started as compassion was threatening the entire community. Clara sat by the stream running through the valley, wrestling with a difficult decision. She could leave and spare Haven Valley the danger, but that meant abandoning the first place she'd ever felt welcome. "Troubled thoughts?" asked Maria Santos, approaching with a water bucket. "I'm thinking about leaving," Clara said honestly. "Pike will be back, and I can't let Haven Valley be destroyed because of me." Maria sat beside her. "Running rarely solves anything. Trust me, I've tried it." She told Clara about fleeing after her husband's murder, spending 3 years drifting without building anything lasting. "It was Thomas Haven who convinced me that running wasn't living, it was just slower dying. But if I stay, Pike will destroy everything you've built." "Life rarely offers choices between fair and unfair," Maria said. "Usually we choose between different kinds of difficulty." She stood. "Before you decide, Thomas wants to see you in the meeting hall." An hour later, Clara found most adult residents gathered in the community center. Thomas Haven stood at the front with a well-dressed stranger. "Clara," Haven called, "meet Judge William Morrison. He's been investigating your case." Judge Morrison extended his hand. He was perhaps 50, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "I understand you've been having trouble with bounty hunters." "Yes, sir. But I don't want to involve anyone else." "Too late for that," Morrison said with a slight smile. "Thomas contacted me 3 days ago. The results of my investigation are interesting." He pulled out official documents. "The accusations against you are based entirely on circumstantial evidence from questionable witnesses. More importantly, your pursuers have no legal authority in this territory." Clara felt hope spark. "And what does that mean?" "Mayor Thompson exceeded his authority by hiring bounty hunters across territorial boundaries. Any forced removal would constitute kidnapping. I've issued warrants for Pike's arrest for operating without credentials." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. "They can't take me back?" "Not legally. If they try, they'll face serious charges." Morrison tucked away his documents. "I've also written the territorial governor about Thompson's overreach." But Haven raised a cautioning hand. "Legal protection and practical safety aren't always the same. Men like Pike don't let legal niceties stop them." Morrison nodded gravely. "Which is why I've taken additional measures." He turned toward the door. "Gentlemen," 3 territorial marshals in official uniforms entered. "Deputy Marshals Cooper, Williams, and Cruz will be stationed here for the next month. ensuring Pike understands the consequences of further illegal activities. Relief swept through the gathered residents. The threat that had hung over Haven Valley was finally lifting, but Clara found herself struggling with conflicting emotions. Judge Morrison. What happens to the people in Millbrook who made false accusations? What happens to Mayor Thompson? Morrison's expression grew thoughtful. That depends. Are you interested in pursuing charges? Clara considered carefully. Part of her wanted revenge, but a larger part had moved beyond that desire. No, she said finally. I don't want to become someone who uses the law as a weapon. I just want freedom to build a new life. Morrison smiled approvingly. That's wise and mature. However, I'll notify Millbrook that further harassment will result in federal intervention. As residents dispersed, Clara walked with Thomas Haven toward the settlement's edge. The older man seemed lost in thought. What happened here has been remarkable, Haven said eventually. Not just your arrival and the bounty hunters, but how our community responded. People chose to stand together rather than turn you over to avoid trouble. They're good people, Clara said. Yes, but good people sometimes need good examples to remind them of their courage. Haven stopped and faced her. You could have snuck away, Clara. Instead, you stayed and faced danger alongside us. That character is rare. Clara felt embarrassed. I didn't do anything special. That, Haven smiled, is exactly what makes it special. They walked in comfortable silence, watching the settlement's daily life unfold. I have a proposal, Haven said as they reached the community garden. We need someone to coordinate trade relationships with other settlements. Someone who can travel, negotiate, and represent our interests. The position comes with permanent community membership and a voice in decisions. Clara stopped, stunned. You're asking me to stay permanently? I'm asking you to become one of us, if that's what you want, to help us build something lasting. Haven's expression was earnest. You've seen what we're creating, a place where people are judged by actions rather than backgrounds. But we can't do it alone. Why me? Because you understand rejection and persecution, because you have courage to stand up for what's right even when dangerous, and because you've proven you'll sacrifice comfort for others' good. Haven gestured toward the bustling settlement. These people trust you, Clara. You've earned it. Clara looked around at the community that had welcomed, defended, and now offered her a permanent home. 3 days ago, she had been a fugitive with no prospects. Now she was being asked to help shape a remarkable experiment in human cooperation. More than that, she had found something she'd searched for her entire life without knowing it, a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. I accept, she said, surprised by her own certainty. I want to help you build this dream. Thomas Haven's face broke into a wide smile. Welcome home, Clara Whitmore. Welcome to Haven Valley. That evening, as residents gathered around their communal fire, Clara felt deep contentment settle over her. The flames danced against the darkening sky, casting warm light on faces that had become dear to her. So, said Sarah, settling beside Clara with a plate of stew, what's the first thing you want to accomplish as our trade coordinator? Clara thought carefully. I want to establish relationships with other communities like ours, places where people are building something better. If we can create a network of cooperation, we'll all be stronger. That's ambitious, commented Maria. But I like it. The world needs more places where people can start over. More than that, Clara said, gazing into the fire, it needs proof that different people can work together successfully. If Haven Valley can thrive, maybe others will try similar experiments. Thomas Haven nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking like a true community leader. Change spreads from example to example, person to person, community to community. Dune. As evening wore on and residents drifted toward their homes, Clara remained by the dying fire, reflecting on her life's extraordinary turn. A week ago, she had been preparing to flee Millbrook in shame. Tonight, she was planning how to help build a better world. The orphan girl who crossed the river alone had found something on the other shore that truly changed everything. Not just her circumstances, but her understanding of what was possible when people chose to see the best in each other rather than the worst. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, trade agreements to negotiate, relationships to build, and the ongoing work of proving Haven Valley's vision could survive frontier realities. But tonight, Clara Whitmore was simply content to be home.